Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for November 5th, 2025. Last night in Israel, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets and the city's plazas to commemorate the life of Yitzhak Rabin. Rabin, who presided over the Oslo process of attempting to establish a basis for peace with the Palestinians, was murdered 30 years ago. On November 4th, 1995, just 2 years after he had concluded the original Oslo agreement with Yasser Arafat and the Palestine Liberation Organization. The tens of thousands of people who came out, including, I'm told, about 150,000 in Tel Aviv, were out to honor Rabin as a man who did what he could to change the axioms of the relations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Rabin himself was not a peacenik per se. He was a military man. He served as the head of the Israel Defense Forces during the Six-Day War. He was in charge of security during the Intifada after 1987. He was a prime minister from 74 to 77. And then again, he was reelected in 1992, at which point he moved ahead for a back-channel discussion and agreement with Arafat and the Palestinians. This in itself was revolutionary because up to that point it was illegal for Israeli officials to have relationships or any kind of contact with Arafat and the PLO. And yet Rabin knew that there would be no peace without talks. And so he authorized Shimon Peres to send teams to Oslo to meet with the Palestinians. And the result was an agreement which was signed on September 9th, 1993 in Washington. The original Oslo Accord included economic annexes, which talked about how Israel and the Palestinians should work together on questions of water, on questions of power, on questions of transportation and other areas where they have common interests and common needs. That was the idea in Oslo. LaRouche took it further with the Oasis plan by developing a plan that would provide clean, abundant water to Israel, the Palestinians, and the other Arab neighbors as a way of incentivizing peace and not just using the Palestinians as slave labor, as a pool of cheap labor, but to integrate them into the benefits of Israeli society. Now, in doing this, he not only broke with the policy which said no talking with the PLO, but he negotiated a process called Land for Peace that said that you can only achieve an agreement if some of the land is returned to the Palestinians and how much would be negotiated. That was the political side of the agreement. And as LaRouche said, don't start with the politics because there's too much division. Start with the common. That is the joint necessity for economic progress. That was LaRouche's idea. It was unfortunately stopped largely by international financial institutions and naysayers in the United States who did not want to commit themselves to an economic development process for Israel and Palestine, but instead were content, as they are today, for continuing wars of extermination. Now, the Oasis plan of LaRouche was presented to Shimon Peres, and it was apparently well received and was part of the negotiating process within Israel. And it was part of the agreement in the economic annexes for joint cooperation for water, power, transportation, and so on. But it was never implemented, and Rabin was killed. Now, I want to give you some quotes from Rabin to give you a sense of his view of the situation, because, as I said, when he was younger, he was a gung-ho military figure. He was the leader of the Israel Defense Forces in the 1967 war. He was the Minister of Defense during the 1987 Intifada, the Palestinian uprising. which he was intending to suppress with real force. But as Leah Rabin told me when I met with her some years back in Los Angeles, that he came to realize that there could not be peace if it was based on beating the hell out of Palestinians to get them to listen to what the Israelis are telling them. So as one who had endorsed the idea of security through strength earlier, he came to realize that's not adequate. There had to be a peaceful basis for cooperation, and that required sharing advances in technology. So this is where you see Rabin coming full circle, from one who is willing to crack heads for peace to one who said, no, let's find common interest. Now here's just to give you a quick sense of his thinking on things. In September 92, at a speech in Jerusalem, he was asked about Gaza. And he said, I would like Gaza to sink into the sea, but that won't happen. And a solution must be found. Now, in the Knesset, after signing the Oslo Accord, he was attacked by the Netanyahu party, the Likud. And he answered in this way. He said, we are destined to live together on the same soil and the same land. We, the soldiers who have returned from battle stained with blood, as we who have seen our relatives and friends killed before our eyes, who have come from a land where parents bury their children. We have fought against you, the Palestinians. And today we say to you in a loud and clear voice, enough of blood and tears, enough. We have no desire for revenge. We harbor no hatred towards you. We, like you, are people who want to build a home, to plant a tree, to love, live side by side with you in dignity and empathy as human beings, as free men. We are today giving peace a chance, and again saying to you in that clear voice, enough. Gives you a sense of what he was pointing towards, a peace among people, among a peace for the general welfare. Now, he was consistently attacked for shaking Arafat's hand, and he mocked the people who did that by making the following statement. In December of 1993, he said, one does not make peace with one's friends. One makes peace with one's enemies. For a moment, that silenced some of the Netanyahu people. But then, early the next year, there was an incident of a mass shooting of Palestinians at the Cave of the Patriarchs Mosque in Hebron. And here's what Rabin said of that to the people who did that. This was Baruch Goldstein, but he was urged and cited by the anti-Palestinian grouping in the settlers movement. And here's what Rabin said to them. You are not part of the community of Israel. You are not part of the National Democratic camp, which we are all looking at in Israel. He said, you are not part, he said, the National Democratic camp to which we belong in this house, many of the people in it despise you. You are not partners in Zionist enterprise. You, and this he said to the Greater Israel faction, you are a foreign implant. You are an errant weed. Sensible Judaism spits you out. You placed yourself outside the wall of Jewish law. And he said, we say to this horrible man, Baruch Goldstein, who did the killing, and those like him, you are a shame on Zionism and an embarrassment to Judaism. Now, this was the same environment that led to the killing of Rabin, Yigal Amir, who was inspired by the teachings of some of the rabbis, who said it's okay to kill Rabin because he's making peace with the enemies of the Jews. Now, this is the mentality we see today with Ben-Gvir, with Smotrich, with Netanyahu. The attempt to continue a war of vengeance and violence when the potential for peace is now there. A peace treaty will soon be signed by Israel with other countries, assuming Israel sticks to the Gaza plan. That's the intent of President Trump. But the question is, does it mean anything if there's going to be this recrimination and this drive to make the Palestinians pay? And so Rabin basically said, we must change. We must change our identity. We must change our commitment. And that's what he pledged to do. And for making that pledge and that commitment, he paid for it with his life. Now that's what we have to bring home to people. No one should die for the cause of peace. Peace itself depends on a communication process. The fact is that since 1967, the period of Oslo was the only period of time in which there was actual legitimate negotiation between Jews and the Arab population. If you don't talk, if you don't have diplomacy, how will you get peace? How will you get forgiveness if you instead insist that you're right in killing people? So as we memorialize Yitzhak Rabin today, we remember he was a fighter, he was a tough man, but he was committed to this process of recognizing the benefit of the other. That by doing that, you create the basis for peace. And this is where we stand right now in the history of our current times and doings. Either we make the breakthrough and go to Oslo on the basis of mutual benefit, or I should say the Oasis plan, or there may not be another chance. So to honor Rabin, let's get the waters flowing. Let's get the Oasis plan going. Start moving the earth. Let's do that now.